Hello? Oh, there we go. Good morning. Luke 14:25-35. The cost of being a disciple. A large crowd was following Jesus. He turned around and said to them, "If you want to be my disciple, you must hate everyone else by comparison. Your father, mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even your own life. Otherwise, you cannot be my disciple. And if you do not carry your cross and follow me, you cannot be my disciple. But don't begin until you can count the cost. For who would begin construction of a building without first calculating the cost to see if there's enough money to finish it? Otherwise, you might complete only the foundation, running out of money, and then everyone else would laugh at you. They would say, 'There's the person who started the building and couldn't afford to finish it.' Or, would a king go to war against another king without first sitting down with his counselors to discuss whether his army of 10,000 could defeat the 20,000 of soldiers marching against him? And if he can't, will he send a delegation to discuss terms of peace while the enemy is still far away? So you cannot become my disciple without giving up everything you own. Salt is good for seasoning, but if it loses its flavor, how do you make it salty again? Flavorless salt is good neither for the soil nor for the manure pile. It is thrown away. Anyone with ears to hear should listen and understand."
Thanks, Don. Good morning, everybody. Now, it wasn't that long ago that I was reading this blog that I like to read quite frequently, and they had a video of a brand new product that they thought was a little strange. So I thought, okay, I'm going to take a look at this. Now, one of the reasons I read this blog, it comes out once a day, Monday to Friday. I jump on there kind of first thing in the morning just to see what they have to say. But one of the reasons I love this blog is because of the fact they link to some of the craziest, weirdest videos you can possibly see on YouTube. I mean, they must have a research department that just looks for the newest and greatest things. And so I jump on there, and one of the things they had was this YouTube video for an infomercial. They explained that this is one of the best, greatest products ever invented. And so I thought, okay, I got to see what this is. Now, many of us are familiar with these as seen on TV advertisements, right? They start off with expressing some great problem, right? What is it that mankind or humankind just needs to be solved? It has to be fixed. And then they express their great sales pitch. This is how to solve that amazing problem. Like, if nobody else has dealt with this, we're going to make sure we deal with this product. And of course, it always ends with one of two things. It always says, but wait, there's more. Or it'll go on and it'll say, but if you act now, you can have more than one of these, right? We're all familiar with these type of infomercials. So I jumped on there. I thought, okay, I got to see what this amazing world-solving problem is going to be this time. And they introduced the Rolly Egg Master. This product is designed to help you cook eggs with ease, to make it a whole lot simpler. You don't have to worry about cleanup. You don't have to pan fry. It makes it so simple. Now, personally, I look at this, and it basically looks like an egg on a stick. To me, I just can't get around the concept of eating an egg like a popsicle. I can't do it. And the thing just kind of squirts out the top like a toaster. It just didn't make any sense to me. But this is the newest, greatest product they've talked about. Great sales pitch. Or how about this one? It's called the Zoomies. These are wearable binoculars. And their world-solving problem is the fact that traditional binoculars are so heavy, they cause such extreme arm fatigue that it would be a whole lot better if you just wear your binoculars. I think just looking at that picture, I don't think I could wear my binoculars. Right? And then we get another one of my personal favorites called pajama jeans. All the classic look of a nice pair of jeans and the comfort of pajamas. I looked this one up, and one of the blogs that was explaining this product said, if you love the look of jeans, buy jeans. That's my sentiment exactly. Now here's one that I would have to definitely consider before I went out and purchased this. It's called the air curler. It's an attachment to your blow dryer that is supposed to be able to curl your hair. And that reason they want that is because they say, oh, curling irons are just too much work, too much time, whatever. Every time I see this, I go back to that movie where the guy attached a vacuum cleaner to a pair of razors so that you could shave your head without having to worry about the messy cleanup. Like, to me, it just doesn't make any sense. I can't get around it. So I finally decided, okay, I got to find the one that I think is just the craziest. The one that it got my head spinning. I got to go, okay, I got to find this one. It didn't take me very long to find one that had this great sales pitch. They said it's the best product out there. And I thought, okay, this is interesting. And not only that, it's one of the best-selling products on the internet, they say. It's called the Wax Vac. It speaks for itself, especially that picture. The sales pitch for this device is that it's the best and safest ear cleaning tool you can buy so that you don't have to endanger your life with the deadly cotton swab. I don't think I've ever had to worry about my life being taken by a cotton swab. Does anybody own any of these 5 products just by chance? See, there's a few of them out there. Impulse buys, maybe? Do they actually work? Well, they do. All right, maybe I have to. Now, I know I'm being overly dramatic. I know some of these products, if not all of these products, probably solve the problems that they are set out to solve. But the focus I wanted to bring on these is not the product themselves, but how it's advertised, right? Almost every advertisement is exactly the same. Every one of these 5 things, as seen on TV, you know you're going to get, okay, here's the problem, here's the great pitch, and then your typical spiel at the end. Buy now, here's how much it costs, send your check and money order, but wait, there's more. It's like this scripted thing. And as I thought about this, I thought, okay, these sales pitches aren't that good, right? Especially if you start watching TV and you start seeing the good sales pitches, the ones by companies that have a lot of money that are able to spend. So, I mean, your big box stores, maybe your Walmarts, your Coca-Colas, McDonald's, that type of stuff. These companies, they have the catchy jingle and the great advertisement. They just inspire you in some ways if they're done well. And when you compare that to an infomercial, there's just a stark difference. It just blows my mind how much it's different. I mean, if you think about it, how many times have you walked into a mall and you've thought, okay, I remember that infomercial, I've got to get that product. And I'm not saying you went to the mall specifically just to get that product, but you're just kind of strolling in, you're walking around the mall, you're perusing, you're like, man, I wonder where I can get myself a Snuggie. You don't do that. But when you think of some of the products, you're like, oh yeah, okay, I want to go to Target or I need to go to the Apple store or whatever, because these are the ones that you remember. You remember these marketing campaigns. Because a good marketing campaign, a good slogan, a good pitch will cause a crowd to gather rather than to disperse. You get inspired or intrigued, and so you jump online. You want to find out more information. You're like, okay, I got to find out what this product does and what it's worth. And that's one of the things that these as seen on TV ads don't seem to have. The interesting thing is the idea of a good sales pitch is not something that just kind of popped up when we invented the television. It's not something that existed on radio or even television, but it goes back even farther than that. The fact is, we've seen how important a good sales pitch is for a really long time throughout history. Because a good sales pitch, one that just draws you in, is a great tool for a leader. A leader can gather a crowd. He can inspire them. He can build them up, and then he can do what he wants with that crowd. He can use that crowd to his advantage, whether it's for political means or whatever it is. We see that. And we see it in the Bible too. I mean, consistently we see Jesus attracting large crowds because of what he said, attracting many people so that he could heal and teach and disciple. But as I was thinking about it, much like the infomercials that we just talked about for these products, it seems to me that Jesus needs a lesson in basic marketing. Because often we see Jesus do exactly the opposite with the crowd that he's gathered. He doesn't inspire them or motivate them, at least not a lot of them. In fact, there's times where just as he's building this huge momentum, he's building this great crowd, he's going to inspire them to go take over the world and overthrow the Romans, all of a sudden he slips through the crowd and he goes off into the wilderness to pray. And there's other times where he's building this great momentum. He's got this crowd and everybody's like, yeah, let's go do it. And all of a sudden he'll tell a parable, just like the one we heard this morning, that just drives the crowds away. We see actually throughout Scripture, we see the disciples actually getting kind of ticked off at Jesus. What are you doing? Why are you sending the crowds away? Why do you disappear on us? And what he is doing is, rather than gathering the crowd, he's actually pushing them away. And this parable this morning does the same thing. He drives them away. He tells 4 quick parables in very quick succession that would have driven the disciples absolutely crazy. Because as we heard them, these are not a great sales pitch. But Jesus understood something very clearly. And that's what I want to look at this morning, is that Jesus understood that sometimes you don't need a good marketing campaign. Sometimes what is more important is the content of the message itself. If you've been with us over the course of the summer, we've been going through a series that we've called The Greatest Stories Ever Told, Unpacking the Parables of Jesus. Now, just to reinforce, does anybody remember what the definition of a parable is? Short story, it's half of it. Big idea, I think I heard. Right, short story, big idea. So a parable is something short, sweet, easy to get across, but it always conveys some type of idea that when you read about it, you think on it, all of a sudden you see this depth in a story. You see a lot more than what was just said. And so when we unpack a parable, when we start looking at it, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for that depth, that idea. What is Jesus trying to say? So this morning, let's go to Luke chapter 14. We're going to start in verse 25. We just want to reread this parable that Don read for us this morning so that we're all on the same page here. Luke chapter 14, starting in verse 25. It says, "A large crowd was following Jesus. He turned around and said to them, 'If you want to be my disciple, you must hate everyone else by comparison. Your father and your mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even your own life. Otherwise, you cannot be my disciple. And if you do not carry your own cross and follow me, you cannot be my disciple. But don't begin until you count the cost. For who would begin construction of a building without first calculating the cost to see if there is enough money to finish it? Otherwise, you might complete only the foundation before running out of money. And then everyone would laugh at you. They would say, there's the person who started that building and couldn't afford to finish it.' Verse 31 says, 'Or what king would go to war against another king without first sitting down with his counselors to discuss whether his army of 10,000 could defeat the 20,000 soldiers marching against him? And if he can't, he will send a delegation to discuss terms of peace while the enemy is still far away. So you cannot become my disciple without giving up everything you own. Salt is good for seasoning, but if it loses its flavor, how do you make it salty again? Flavorless salt is good neither for the soil nor for the manure pile. It is thrown away. Anyone with ears to hear should listen and understand.'" Now, with these 4 successive parables, we need to understand something right away to understand its depth. We need to look at the fact that Jesus wasn't interested in the crowd. He wasn't interested in a good marketing campaign. For him, a mob of people that followed him around wherever he went, that were basically waiting for the next miracle, didn't serve his purpose while he was here on earth. Because his purpose was to educate his disciples. And the reason is he knew that when things got difficult, when things were rough, when they started to face persecution and pressure, that the crowd would leave him. And it would be the disciples that would stick close. So the purpose of this was to educate the disciples. And so when we look at these parables, which you see subtitled or subheaded in your Bible, it usually is called the Cost of Discipleship. We need to understand that Jesus wasn't trying to placate the crowd. Instead, he was giving a great sales pitch to his disciples. He was teaching them. He wanted to instruct them. And the thing we need to remember, a couple of weeks ago we talked about not only is a parable a small story with a big idea, but we have to ask ourselves, how do we play a part in that parable? How do we look at it from our perspective? And what it is for this one is the fact that he is teaching his disciples, which means that he is teaching us. The Great Commission says that we are to go and make disciples, which means we are disciples and we go make disciples. So Jesus is speaking specifically to us. In fact, if you look at the New Testament, only 3 times in the entire scope of the New Testament does it use the word Christian. And all 3 times it is mostly used as a derogatory term. It's almost slanderous. It's the Jews and the Romans making fun of these people that followed Jesus Christ. But rather, when you look at the scripture, it refers to the followers of Jesus, not just the 11 original men that were still around, but everyone that followed him as a disciple. In fact, the word disciple is used over 270 times in the New Testament. And so what we have to do is forget this idea of what it means to be a Christian and to focus in on what it means to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. Because Jesus isn't interested in just taking from us. The world's really good at that. They use us up, they spit us out. But rather, Jesus is asking us to freely give of ourselves. And then what he does is he disciples us, he teaches us, he gives us the things that we have given him back with more in return. Right? The math doesn't add up, but that's the way it works. And then we use that with his calling and his discipleship to influence and change the world. And when we look at these parables, Jesus uses probably some of the starkest, strongest, harshest language that he uses anywhere else in the Gospels. And the reason is because he wants not to sugarcoat anything. He wants to be 100% completely authentic with what it means to follow Jesus Christ. What it means that to be throughout history to be his disciples. And within that, there's a point that Jesus is trying to get across over and over and over again. So we know that we're a disciple, but what does that mean? And that is, he's telling us, do not quit. Don't quit. Persevere. We look again at Luke 14, 25 to 27. It says, a large crowd was following Jesus. He turned around and said to them, if you want to be my disciple, again, there's the word. It's not a follower, but it's a disciple. You must hate everyone else by comparison. Your father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even your own life. Otherwise, you cannot be my disciple. Now, when we read this passage, it seems to be in conflict to Jesus. I mean, nobody in history spoke more about love, displayed love, focused in on love than Jesus Christ. And yet here Jesus is saying that we're supposed to hate somebody. How does that make sense? I mean, how could Jesus say that we have to hate someone when his entire ministry, in fact, the entire Bible is focused on his love for his people? How as a disciple can we rectify this and figure this out? In fact, on my first reading, this is one of those passages that as a believer, you read it over and you go, that doesn't make sense. I'm going to move on. I'll figure it out later, right? We just kind of skip over it because it just doesn't make any sense. But what Jesus is trying to do is he's trying to call us into a relationship that is altogether different from every other relationship that we will have. Every single one of them. Because our relational commitment to him is going to be different than every other relationship we have. What Jesus is saying is that in comparison to our earthly relationships, our focus, devotion, and full allegiance has to be on him. Because he's worth it. No one, and I mean no one, can be as significant as Jesus in our lives. David Bach, who wrote a commentary on the book of Luke, says it like this. It says, the call to hate simply means to love less. The image is strong, but it is not a call to be insensitive or to leave all feeling behind. Following Jesus is to be the disciples' first love. This pursuit is to have priority over family members and one's own life, which means that other concerns are to take second place to following Jesus. See, the reason is every other relationship that we have in life has the potential to let us down, except for our relationship with Him. If we put any of these relationships that we have here on earth at the same level as our relationship with Jesus Christ, we're going to be disappointed. For example, I love my wife dearly. She's my best friend. She knows more about me than anybody else. She knows my thoughts, my opinions. But there is on a rare occasion where we might disagree on something. And I'm going to be let down. I mean, regardless of whether I'm right or wrong in that situation, I'm going to be let down because we don't agree on something. And just to clarify, honey, you're always right. Let's just get that straight off the bat before we move any farther. And that is why we have to set our priority on Jesus. Everything else must follow. And what Jesus is doing here is he's using the language of the Old Testament to convey this idea. He's actually referring to something that most of his hearers, the Jews, would have understood. And he's using the language of the story of Jacob and Esau. Now, if you're familiar with that story, Jacob and Esau, you'll have the understanding that God favored Jacob and tended to look down upon Esau. Now, both were blessed. Both became great nations, but he definitely had this affinity for Jacob. And what we see, Paul actually refers to this in Romans 9:13. He actually says that God revealed through the story, through the scriptures, that he actually loved Jacob and hated Esau. Again, that doesn't make any sense. How can God love someone and hate someone else? It just seems to go in complete conflict to Jesus, to God himself, to his character. We say God is love. How can that go against it? And really what he's trying to do is he's trying to help us in our limited language skills to be able to define levels of love. He's trying to help us determine that it doesn't mean that he loves and he hates, but really that he loves more and he loves less. And practically what this means is that we have to consciously set in our lives priorities, especially having Jesus at number one. Because the time will come when the relationships that you have in your life are going to put pressure on your relationship with Jesus. Many of you here are aware of this. It's one of the reasons why you're even in Canada in the first place, because of the pressure, whether it was from the family or government or whatever it was. Relationships put pressure on you to give up your relationship with Jesus Christ, and you weren't willing to do so. And so you came to Canada to have that freedom. I mean, it doesn't take very long to just watch the news and realize that admitting to a belief in Jesus Christ, to be his disciple, in some countries is as good as a death sentence. Right? I mean, there's an American pastor in jail in Iran right now because he will not rescind his declaration that he believes in Jesus Christ. And this is true around the world. And Jesus knew that. That's why he even says to the point of death, we have to be willing to commit to Jesus Christ. That's just the cost of discipleship. Some of you maybe have had your parents or brothers or sisters saying, you know what, we don't like you being a Christian. We don't like you doing that whole church thing. You got to stop praying. You got to stop singing those songs. You're no fun anymore. Right? This is the pressure that we get from family members. And really what they're doing is they're telling you to give up on that relationship. And Jesus is coming back and saying, don't quit. Don't quit. In light of this pressure, you have to decide, where is your relationship with Jesus going to be? Are you going to put him first where he needs to be, where he wants to be? Or are you going to give in to that pressure from your family? And Jesus is saying, don't give up. Don't quit. Even the pressure from your children can cause you to question this. And that is, if you have children that are walking away from God, they're sinning, maybe they're partying or drinking or smoking or whatever it is that you just, okay, that's not within your scope of biblical truth. If you condone their actions, and even more so, if you don't say anything to them, what you're actually doing is you're endorsing it. You're actually putting your children above God, because we are called to put Jesus first. And when we put Jesus first, that means that we have the ability to provide biblical truth and biblical discipline into our children. And so you got to be careful. What are you condoning in your children? And where are you making sure that you step up and say, you know what? That's wrong. You shouldn't be doing that. Where is your priority level? Maybe it's your spouse. Maybe it's your grandparents. Maybe it's close friends. I mean, you get that pressure in school. You get that pressure at work. You know what? Just don't do that whole God thing. We've all heard the different terms, right? There's the Bible thumper, the crazy Christians, right? The charismaniacs, right? We've heard these terms if you've grown up in the church. And what God is saying is, don't worry about that pressure. Don't give up. I will be with you. Just don't give up. And the fact is we're going to face opposition in this life. We don't have a choice on that. And Jesus over and over and over again isn't giving a great sales pitch. He's not saying, yeah, if you accept me, your life is going to be cheery for the rest of your days. No, instead he's saying, look, life is life. It's not fair. But rather than walking it alone, you can walk it with me. Just don't give up. Do not quit. Regardless of what it costs you. I mean, if it costs you your parents, right? If it costs you your kids, that relationship falls apart because you put Jesus first. If it's a relationship with coworkers, maybe it's a relationship with friends, this is the type of decision we're going to have to make, that you have to put Jesus first, and he's saying, do not quit. If we go further into this, we look at the next little short parable that he talks about. There's a theme that he has here as well. Do not quit. There's a central theme starting to run through this. Looking again, Luke 14, 28 to 30. It says, but don't begin until you count the cost. For who would begin construction of a building without first calculating the cost to see if there is enough money to finish it? Otherwise, you might complete only the foundation before running out of money, and then everyone would laugh at you. They would say, there's the person who started that building and couldn't afford to finish it. So first Jesus talks about friends and family, and now he's talking about commitments. Because when you become a disciple of Jesus, it's a full-time commitment. Every other aspect of life tends to fall out of that once you've committed there. And what is required of us is that before we say yes, maybe we need to take stock of our schedules. We need to go, okay, is this something that I can do? Is this something I should do before saying yes? Maybe you need to do your homework. Because everything that we do is a reflection of our relationship with Jesus. And I would rather finish 2 or 3 races really, really well than have 9 or 10 things go on in perpetuity that I never finish. And a lot of that is because the world, in harshest sense, they tend to quit. And if we can represent Jesus well by not quitting, by fulfilling what we have said yes to, let our yeses be yes and our noes be no, then we're going to have favor, and we're going to show that commitment that we have made to Jesus Christ. Now, when I moved into my house here in Northwest Calgary about 5 years ago, the first thing I did, literally as soon as the moving truck was emptied and all the boxes and furniture were strewn around my living room, the very first thing I did, even before I unpacked a box, is I changed my thermostat. I figured, okay, I got to get rid of this old mercury-based slider thing that just seems to suck my wallet dry, and I'm going to put one of these nice programmable thermostats so I can control when I'm here, when I'm not here, try and save some money. The problem was, when I pulled off the old thermostat, I realized very quickly why the previous owners had painted the house, because a wonderful bright pink color was there, which means the previous owner to that had painted the house pink. I can't understand that, but there's this bright pink patch. And I thought to myself, you know what? As soon as I get all this stuff done, as soon as I unpack, I'm going to go fix that. I'll buy a little can of paint. I'll make sure I wash over that pink patch, right? So I started unpacking and kind of stayed there. And then I started switching jobs from working downtown to working here. And then I got married, and then I had kids, and then I got busy, and I started doing this. Needless to say, that patch got fixed on Friday by my wife. 5.5 years later, finally got dealt with. That's why she's always right. Now, I know this is a small issue, but it does reflect our commitment level. What are we saying yes to? Because we have to follow through with our commitments. I mean, I just want to ask you, who here made a New Year's resolution? Come on, be honest. Who made a New Year's resolution? Who here is still following their New Year's resolution? There's a few of you. It's a whole lot less than what put up their hands the first time. Right away, you said yes to something, and did you follow through? I mean, how is your Bible reading? How is your prayer life? How's your devotional life? When was the last time that you volunteered for something and you showed up and you did it to the best of your ability right to the very end? What Jesus is saying here is to be a disciple, you need to be careful when you raised your hand because it's going to cost you. Being a disciple means finishing what you said you would finish. Running the race to the end to the best of your ability. I would really hope that as disciples we do not let our words be void, that we don't give empty promises and wondering what Jesus is all about because we're no different than the rest of the world. When we are asked something, we need to be asking, am I capable of this? Can I do this? Do my priorities line up with this? Can I afford to do this from a monetary standpoint, from a time standpoint? Can I do this? Because over and over again, what Jesus is saying is that when you commit to something, don't quit. Do not quit. See it to the very end. Jesus doesn't want half your life. He doesn't want half your heart, half your time, half your devotion, half your money. He's asking for all of it. He wants to be represented well in everything that you set your hand and minds to. And I know this can be hard, especially for those of us, and I'm just as bad for this. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir this morning. The fact that we say yes to too many things, and then we're like, okay, what did I say yes to? Do I need to maybe go back and say no to that? No, I'll just do everything that I said I would do, right? And too often, the world around us is just quitting. They say yes, and then they quit. They quit on their kids. They quit on their marriages. They quit on school. They quit on their jobs. They quit on whatever they have committed to us. And it's time for us to stand up and fight. To fight for our marriages, to fight for our kids, to represent Jesus well by fighting for our principles in our workplaces, by fighting for our principles in our schools. Instead of backing down, we need to stand up and fight. And really what that is saying is that we're not going to quit. We're going to stand strong. We're going to push through as Jesus called us to do. And as we look at the third parable, interesting theme, do not quit. That's the next one. Luke 4:31-33. Or what king would go to war against another king without first sitting down with his counselors to discuss whether his army of 10,000 could defeat the 20,000 soldiers marching against him? And if he can't, he will send a delegation to discuss terms of peace while the enemy is still far away. So you cannot become my disciple without giving up everything you own. The amazing thing I love about Jesus and his parables is the fact that he knows, even though he's not trying to attract the crowd, he's not catering to the crowd, he knows how to speak to the crowd. And so the first message that he comes across is he's going to talk about family and friends. Now that should be able to relate to everybody. But just in case it doesn't, he starts talking about a construction or an agricultural parable. That's really what the building is all about. Things that the Jewish people would really understand. Right? He's tied into them. Now the interesting thing is here he goes, the next thing he goes into is actually a military parable. Right? Something that a lot of people in the Jewish region may not have known a lot about. I mean, they had been under rule by somebody else for hundreds of years. They didn't have their own army. A lot of them wouldn't be familiar with this. And I thought, okay, God, why in the world would Jesus be talking about a military parable when most of the people there wouldn't understand? And what I got thinking about is the fact that it's no wonder the Romans knew what Jesus was doing, because when you gather a large crowd and you're worried about riots, what are you going to do? You're going to send soldiers. right? I mean, every time you see here in Canada or the U.S., you see some type of a riot, or you see some type of a crowd that's marching against like City Hall or whatever, you see the police there. Now, hopefully most of the time they never have to do anything, but they're there. And so you have to think that the same thing was happening. You have this huge crowd of people, and they're likely in that crowd would have been interspersed of Roman soldiers. So what he's now doing is he's now pulling on those people and saying, look, if you didn't understand the first parable, if you didn't understand the second parable, you will understand this third parable. And what he is saying is that there are times in our life when we are going to face a battle. We are going to have to fight, and the odds are not going to be in our favor. And what he is saying, anybody want to hazard a guess? Don't quit. Don't quit. Push through. Persevere. Don't quit. Now, I read a great article on archaeology, or in an archaeological article about the city of Galatia. The city of Galatia is in Asia Minor. We see it actually, the book of Galatians is written to the church in Galatia. And the thing, if you look at this city, it really should have been indefensible. There's no way that city should have been able to stand for the hundreds of years that it did with attacker coming after it again and again and again. There's no way. And yet this city did survive. It survived over and over and over again. And the professor who was explaining this said that the reason Galatia survived is because the people there fought differently than everybody else. He said what they would do is when they went to battle, they would take their wives and their children with them. And the soldiers would kiss their wives and kiss their sons and their daughters, and they would say, okay, Daddy's going to war with those guys over there. And if Daddy loses, they're going to change your last name. My daughters, it's very possible you're going to marry their sons. And my wife, I fear what they're going to do to you. And they would go off to war. And if that man won, he got to take his family home. And if that man lost, somebody else took his family home. And those guys didn't lose a battle for hundreds of years because of the way they fought. Because when you fight for someone you love, when you fight for a kingdom that you hold dear, you fight differently. And that's what Jesus is calling each of us to do today, to fight differently, to fight for him, to fight for his kingdom, to fight for what he did for each and every one of us. And every day of our lives, we have to remember that. See, the thing is Jesus has already won a battle for us. He's already lived a perfect life for you. He's already died a brutal death for you. He's already rose from the dead for you. He's already ascended to heaven for you. And all he's asking you to do is now fight for him. And every day of your life, from now until the very last, you need to fight for him, for his love, for his kingdom, for the love that he displayed for you and freely gave to you. And to not quit when things seem unfair, when things seem to get stacked against you. We have to have a clear understanding that living a life for Jesus isn't always going to be easy. It's not always an easy stroll through the park. Or as Pastor Dave likes to put it, a tiptoe through the tulips. Right? It's not going to be that way. It's going to have its ups and downs. It's going to have its mountaintops and its valleys. And what he's saying is don't quit. Do not quit. Do not quit. Do not quit. Do not quit. Over and over again. Parable after parable after parable after parable. There's an interesting story from history where generals who wanted to conquer a new land or who wanted to investigate that land would land on the shores in their boats, and once everybody had offloaded their boats, they would burn them. They'd torch them to the ground. And basically those generals were telling their soldiers, there's only two options: forward or death. Forward or death. And that has to be our understanding as well. That has to be our attitude in regards to this life. Forward or death. That's what discipleship's all about. There's a cost to it. But Jesus is calling you to do it. And he's calling you, don't quit. Persevere. The end is worth it. The blessing is worth it. Don't quit. Push through. Persevere. Do whatever you can. We don't have time to go through the fourth parable this morning, but again, anybody want to hazard a guess when he's talking about salt, what he's talking about? Do not quit. Over and over again, this is what he's saying. And we're at the point where we have to ask ourselves the question, what's our life going to look like? What decision are we going to make in regards to our life? Are we going to be a contributor or a consumer? Are we in this thing for the long haul? Are we going to get out of the race early? Are we a disciple or are we a disappointment? Because make no mistake, you've got to ask yourself that question, because that's the question that's going to be asked on your last day. How did you do? Were you a disciple? Did you persevere to the end? As Paul wrote, did you run the race? Did you run it well and see it to completion? Jesus is asking you today, which team are you playing for? Which army are you serving with? Which cross are you going to carry? Which God are you going to serve? Because make no mistake, if anything is at the same level of Jesus or above him, it is a God in your life. It's an idol that needs to be torn down. We need to understand, where is our priority? Where is God in our life? What place have we put him in? And for a sermon like this, which tends to be a little bit heavier, I want all of us to stand this morning, because it's time for us to reflect. It's time for us to really choose to make a stand. Now the thing is there's two people here this morning, two types of people here this morning. Those of you that haven't even started this process yet. You're not even a follower, let alone a disciple. And this morning, what I want to encourage you with is exactly that. You have the option this morning to invite a relationship with Jesus Christ, one who has done more and will continue to do more for you than anyone else ever will. Someone that you never have to worry about being disappointed with, someone you don't have to worry about not being there when you need him. Someone who is going to come alongside you and work with you, and he ends up changing us and perfecting us. When we're on the high points, we've got somebody to celebrate with. When we're in the low points, we have somebody who's helping dig us out. That's what a relationship with Jesus is all about. It's not that it's going to be easy, but at least you have somebody who's there. And I can't imagine somebody greater than the God of the universe who created each and every one of us to be there alongside me on my journey. Somebody who sacrificed himself even to the point of death for me. And so this morning you have the choice, first off, not just to be a follower, but to be a disciple and say, you know what? I've never accepted Jesus Christ into my life. I need to do that. I want to be a disciple. I want to be a disciple. And for the rest of us this morning, maybe we've been on this journey for a long time. And there's probably areas in our lives where things have slipped in terms of priority. In certain aspects of our life, maybe we have slipped from being a disciple into being a follower. And what Jesus is calling us today is to recommit ourselves and say, you know what? I'm going to be a disciple, not just a follower. I'm going to commit to this. It doesn't matter the pressures I face. It doesn't matter the commitments I make. It doesn't matter what life throws at me, ups or downs. I am committing to a life with Jesus Christ. I'm all in. I'm not going to hold anything back. I'm not going to hold a certain portion of my life for him, for myself. I'm going to give it all to him. And this morning we have the opportunity to recommit ourselves to what it really means to be a Christian, and that is to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. So what I want to do is I want everybody to bow their heads, close their eyes. I want us to give some room for the Holy Spirit to just come in and show us where certain things maybe have been elevated in terms of importance. Things that maybe we need to set back down, that we shouldn't have picked up. things that are hindering or limiting us from our ability to be a disciple. Maybe even things in our life where we need to go and we need to say no, or maybe things in our life where we need to re-engage in the process and see it through to fulfillment. To really be that light through our dedication. So I'm just going to give a moment here for us to just spend some time listening to what God is saying this morning. Now, those of us that have determined to recommit ourselves to be true disciples of Christ, I just want us to raise our hands. Raising hands is an act of surrender. It's why we do it during worship. It's why we do it when we pray. Because we're giving up everything. We're saying, God, everything is yours. And so, God, we come to you this morning, God, humbled. God, we know there are aspects in our life, God, where maybe we have put certain things above you. And so, God, we ask that you help us to restore that balance, to restore your place in our lives to where it should be, and that is first and foremost affecting everything else. God, we want to be true disciples. God, fully 100% authentically committed to you and to your purpose. Through the ups, the downs, God, through every aspect of our life, God, we are going to commit ourselves to turn to you, to celebrate with you, to get your wisdom, to get your insight, God, to go out and pursue the dreams and callings and purpose upon our lives, God, that you have placed within us. And I really have a sense this morning there are some of you here that you've been given this amazing dream of what God wants you to do in your life. And it's constantly been put on the back burner because of the priorities of your life. And God is saying it's time to not have it sit on the back burner any longer, but to pull it forward. To commit to that dream, and out of that blessing is going to come, fruitfulness is going to come, but you've got to make that commitment here and now today. To pick it back up and to run with it instead of letting everything else hinder its progress. And God, I just pray for each and every one of us today, God, that are on this journey of life. God, we thank you that you are with us. God, that you work with us, that you work in us. God, we recommit ourselves today, God, to be fully devoted disciples of yours. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's give him a clap offering this morning.